Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf Dalid in Masechah Shevuot. We are on the second to last line of Gimel Amabet. And yesterday we noted that our Mishnah does not fit perfectly with either Rabbi Yishmael or Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Yishmael, so just as a reminder, our Mishnah dealt with four topics, each of which it said that you could break them into two, which are four, and they were oaths, tuma, carrying on Shabbos, and saras. And in each, and so the problem is that if we're talking about, if it were according to Rabbi Yishmael, and we were talking about the bringing of a korban olav yored, a variable offering, a variable sin offering. The problem is that Rabbi Yishmael says that a variable offering only gets made for a false oath regarding the future. But our Mishnah suggests that also that sacrifice, the variable offering, the Ola is also offered when you're swearing about the past falsely as well. Rabbi Akiva, so that doesn't fit so well with Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Akiva says when it comes to the Tuma question, and we're dealing with the question of either forgetting that you're Tameh or forgetting that the particular location is the Beit HaMikdash. So he says that you only have to offer the Korban Olav Yored if you don't remember that you're Tameh. But if you remember that you're Tameh, but you just don't realize that you've entered the confines of the Beis HaMikdash where you would, you're not allowed to go, and you're supposed to therefore bring this korban, he says that in that situation you would not bring a korban. So our Mishnah, which suggests all of these, that you have to bring a korban in all of these cases, doesn't fit perfectly with either one. So at the moment, we said that our Mishnah is like Rabbi Yishmael, and instead of talking about a korban olav yored in connection with a shogeg situation, we're talking about a situation where somebody sinned intentionally. And so, as a result, we're talking about a situation where somebody is subject to lashes. And that is true, meaning when Rabbi Yishmael says that you are subject, that the only time you offer a korban olav yored for a false oath is regarding the future, he would still say that if you were to make a false oath regarding the past intentionally, so then you would still be subject to lashes. And so maybe our Mishnah really is Rabbi Yishmael, and in that case where it talked about false oaths, it's really talking about making such an oath intentionally. The problem with this approach at this moment in the Gemara is Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan says two things. Rabbi Yochanan first says that the halacha is like a stam Mishnah. Okay, so that means that the halacha is like our Mishnah, because our Mishnah is a stam Mishnah. It doesn't say who the author is. Indeed, that's why we are asking the question as to who the author is, whether it's Rabbi Yishmael or Rabbi Akiva. And again, at the moment, we're saying it's Rabbi Yishmael. But the problem is that according to Rabbi Yishmael, who we're saying says in our Mishnah that if you were to intentionally make a false oath about something that happened in the past, you would be subject to lashes. That doesn't work with Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan says, as we hopefully remember from Maseches Makos, but it's always useful to have a little bit of chazara, is that a lav she'ein bo maisa is not subject to lashes. And yet that's exactly what a false oath about the past is. It's an oath that lacks any action, because as we saw throughout Maseches Makot, that when you just are speaking, that's not considered an action. And so if one were to make an oath that they had eaten something yesterday when in fact they did not, or they had not eaten something when they in fact had. The only thing that they did wrong is the words that were spoken, because the action was already taken. And so there is no action associated with it. And so as a result, Rabbi Yochanan would say that there should be no malchus. And yet our Mishnah, as we're now interpreting it according to Rabbi Yishmael, says that there is malchus. So we tried yesterday at the end of the day to answer this question by saying, you know what? Rabbi Yochanan could point to a different Stam Mishnah, a different Mishnah that doesn't identify who the author is. And as a result, yes, there might be two Stam Mishnahs, one going one way and one going the other way, but he will hold like the other one. So that's the thought that is going through the mind of the Gemara at the moment. And so let's pick up with the second to last line. Elahai stama ashkach. So rather we could find the following Stam Mishnah, and this is a Mishnah on Daf Kaf Zayin Amabet, so we'll see it in a couple of weeks, just under 4 weeks away. Shevuot shelo ochel kikarzu. If one were to make an oath that says, I'm not going to eat this cookie, Shevuot shelo ochlena, or an oath that and then say after it, I'm making an oath that I'm not going to eat it. So the question is, you've used a double language. Are you subject to having made two oaths about the same cookie? Or do we say, no, the first oath is all that matters. The second oath is just a repetition of something that already exists, and therefore is not going to subject you to a second punishment. V'achla, and then you eat the cookie. So then what is going to happen? We turn to Daled Amud Aleph. Eino chayev ela achas. You're only subject to one sin offering, assuming that you're doing this accidentally. So let's take a look, let's finish up the Mishnah. Zuhi shavuos bitui. This is the oath of a bitui, an utterance, shechayevin al zedona makot, that for which you will be subject to lashes if you do so intentionally, and if you do it unintentionally, if you did not realize that you were eating it, you said that you're not going to eat this cookie, and then that cookie got mixed up, and you thought that you weren't eating that cookie, and you ended up eating that cookie. So then you're going to have to offer a variable sin offering, the Karban Olav Yored, based on your wealth, will determine which specific offering you'll make. So let's take a look at Rashi, top Rashi on Daled Amud Aleph. Eino chayav ela achas, and it'll be useful for at least much of this discussion, and certainly the next few minutes, to keep one finger on Rashi, one finger on the Gemara, so that you can follow along in both. So dema'acher shenishba alav shvua rishona, that the reason that you're only subject to one sin offering is because after you made the first oath, ne'eseres alav, that cookie is prohibited to you. V'ki hadar ishtava, and when you go and swear again, havalei nishba l'kayim es hamitzvah, it's as if you were swearing to fulfill a positive commandment, or fulfill even a negative commandment. Utanan l'kaman, and we will see in the future on Daf Kaf Zayin Amud Aleph, nishba l'kayim es mitzvah. If you make an oath to fulfill a mitzvah, v'lo kiyem, and you don't fulfill it, patur mishvuas karban. You do not have to offer a sacrifice from the perspective of the shvuah. Of course, you have to offer a sacrifice with respect to the mitzvah that you failed to fulfill, but you would not have to, assuming it's the kind of mitzvah for which you would be subject to a korban. But so, for example, if I were to swear that that tomorrow I'll wear tefillin, that's not an oath that will bind me, because I'm already obligated to wear tefillin tomorrow. So Zohi, all right. So that is the what the Mishnah says. Now, the Mishnah's language, if Zuhi Shvuas Bitoy, is now what is going to highlight for us that maybe we can learn from this Mishnah the principle that we are looking for Rabbi Yochanan, which is that a mitzvah she'ein bo ma'isa is going to be subject is not going to be subject to any lashes. So when did we say you're going to get lashes? You're going to get lashes if you say that you're not going to eat this cookie and then you go ahead and eat it, because the eating of the cookie constitutes an action, and that is a violation of your oath. And so as a result, when you're about to eat the cookie, somebody can give you a warning that says, look, if you eat this cookie, you're going to violate your oath. And you can respond, oh, even so, I'm going to eat the cookie because I don't mind getting lashed. And I understand that I'm going to be subject to lashes. And then you'll get lashes because you did an action. But zuhi dechayavin al zedona makos, that this is the one for which you're going to get lashes. Aval ochel v'lo achal. But if you make an oath that you are going to eat the cookie and then you never eat the cookie, well, then you're not going to be subject to lashes, because that is low lucky. You would not get lashes. Why? Because presumably we're deriving from this that you're not going to get lashes because it's a lav she'ein bo ma'isa. There's no action that's associated with it. And so this can be the Mishnah that Rabbi Yochanan cites for the purposes of saying what the halacha is. And he just has two Mishnayos that some ways conflict. But michti, haistama v'haistama. We have now two stam Mishnahs, one and the other. One the first Mishnah in our Masechet, and the second, the Mishnah on Kav Zayin. My chazi to Avid ki haistama le'Avid ki haistama. Why does Rabbi Yochanan specifically think to follow the second of the stam Mishnahs, the one that says that a lav she'ein bo ma'isa does not get lashes? Maybe he should follow the first one and say that a lav she'ein bo ma'isa does get lashes. No, ulatameich, but according to your reasoning, Rebbe Gufei hechi stam lon hacha. How did he hachi b'hacha hachi? Right? How did Rebbe, when he established the Mishnayos, have two stam Mishnahs that seem to conflict with one another? So even if we were able to answer the question about Rabbi Yochanan, how did Rabbi Yehuda Anasi do this? Ella mi'ikara savar lav she'ein bo ma'isa loken alav ustama. So originally, it must be that Rebbe thought that a lav she'ein bo ma'isa does get lashes. V'hadar, and then he went back on it. Savar ein loken alav, and concluded that in fact you do not get lashes. Ustama, and so as a result, he set up a second stam Mishnah. Umishna lo zaza mimukoma, and he decided that he did not want to undermine the first Mishnah, and Rashi helps us understand why not. Okay. Three lines down in the narrow lines of Rashi. Umishna lo zaza mimukoma. Umishna Rishona, the first Mishnah in our Masechet, afal pi shechazar bo mistimasa. Even though he retracted on some level, it's being a unattributed Mishnah, for which the halacha would be like ma'achar shepashta berov hatalmidim. Once it was taught among the majority of students, lo hayacholat b'dorot she'achar Rebbe l'shachacha. It was impossible to cause people to forget it mipiyem ulevatla mi beit hamidrash, and to eliminate it from the Beit Midrash. V'hinicho eshtehen. So as a result, Rebbe left both of them. The intelligent person, Yavin Sha'acharona Ikar, that the second of the two, the 21 on Kav Zayin Bet, is the real one, is the one Shechazar Bo Min Arishona, and people would realize that he retracted from the first one. So, but so now,
tell me, is the first one really a lot? Is the first one really a
Lav Shein Bo Ma'isa?
No, it's a lav sheyesh bo ma'isa. When we talk about he ate the cookie, but the lav that he's over is the Shevuot. let's say if someone
Mhm.
eats treif, then that he shouldn't. Let's say I'm not sure it's a lav or not, but let's say it's a lav. Don't eat
Yeah, for sure it's alive.
non-kosher.
You can't eat if you eat treif. In
Okay,
fact, we saw it
right,
in
but
Maseches
the point
Makos.
is that, but the point I'm saying, I think it's a lav. So if you say if a person eats non-kosher, then he's over the lav. But in this case, the lav that he's over is the shavua, regardless of what he ate. So if he ate or didn't eat, so there's really maybe there's no misa.
No, no, no. So I hear you. I understand the logic of your argument, but the issue is the moment of the violation is how we make the determination. If the moment of the violation is the speaking, because you're speaking about the past, that's a lav she'ein bo ma'isa. But if the moment of the violation is the eating, remember that we just highlighted how if I say that I'm going to eat this, I'm not going to eat this cookie, it's as if there's a mitzvah on me to not eat the cookie. And so by eating the cookie, I have violated that mitzvah, and that eating of the cookie is the violation. It is not the oath that I made. There was nothing wrong with my having made an oath in the first place. It is only the eating of the cookie that causes the problem. And so even though you might say, oh, without having made the oath, there was no violation, absolutely true. But the moment of the violation is the eating of the cookie. And so as a result, it's considered a lav sheyesh bo ma'isa. Now, where are we up to? Let's catch ourselves up to understand what we've accomplished so far, because the Gemara is about to undermine all of it. So maybe I shouldn't bother with it, but let's make sure we understand. There is a question of who the author is of our Mishnah. We have assigned that authorship to Rebbe Yishmael, even though it didn't necessarily fit perfectly. And we've said that our Mishnah, at least when it comes to the discussion of making false oaths, we're saying that it's talking about lashes and not the korbanot that one would need to make. And so as a result, it's not consistent with Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan says that a lav she'ein bo ma'isa does not get lashes. And yet in our Mishnah, it says that something that's in the past, an oath about the past, is one of the violations. And so as a result, if it's one of the violations, so then it suggests that it would get lashes, according to Rabbi Yishmael. Now, according to Rabbi Yishmael, that's fine, because he could say a lav she'ein bo ma'isa does get lashes. But so we then said, oh, you know what? There's another Mishnah on Kaf Zayin that is unattributed. It's also a Stam Mishnah, and it implies that you don't get lashes for a lav she'ein bo ma'isa. And so as a result, we could just say that Rabbi Yochanan is paskening like the second one. And indeed, even Rebbe, we would say he originally thought, Rebbe, how did a Rebbe have this whole thing happen in the first place? Meaning he's the one who set up the Mishnah. So why would he set up one that says one way and another that says another way? So the point is he originally thought one way and then he changed his mind. But this whole thing is problematic, as the Gemara now picks up.
So
As
what do we
we
do with Rav? What does Rav Yochanan then do? Fine, he picks another Mishnah, but what does he do with our Mishnah?
he says that he would say exactly as we've implied, that just like Rebbe, he would say that that was the original position that Rebbe had, but Rebbe changed his mind. And so as a result, he views the first Mishnah as not the halacha. But we're about to change all of that. So it's important to understand, as we pick up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 lines down on Dalet Amud Aleph, B'mai Ukimta, we're going to now undermine all of that. So although it's important to understand in terms of the Shakla V'Tarya of the Gemara, but in the end, we're not going to, all of what we said, we are going to cancel out right now. So, B'mayu Kimta, how did we just establish our Mishnah? Rebbe Yishmael Ula Malchus. We said that our Mishnah is actually talking about Rebbe Yishmael and Malchus. But if you're going to say that our Mishnah is talking about Malchus, so how do you understand it? Maros Negaim, my Malchusika. What kind of lashes could there be in connection with saras? Oh, you know what? I can answer that question. B'kotzeis baharato. If you were to try and cut off your the tsaras. If you try to cut it off, that is going to be subject to lashes. Uka Rabbi Avin Amar Rabbi Allah, as it was said by Rabbi Avin in the name of Rabbi Allah. To Amar Rabbi Avin Amar Rabbi Allah. Kol makom shenemar hishamer pen va'al. Eno ella losasa. Anywhere that the Torah tells us hishamer, that you should be careful, pen lest, or al do not, those are all considered negative commandments. And so as a result, when we say in Perakav Daled Pasuk Chet in Devarim, Hishamer B'nega Hatzaras, that you have to be careful about the affliction of tzarat, it is telling us that you are not allowed to just cut it off. And so as a result, that is an absolute prohibition. And if you were to do so, you'd be subject to lashes if you did it intentionally. Well, 1 second, Yitzios Shabbos, my Malkosika. Well, what about carrying on Shabbos? Are you saying that there are lashes in that situation? Lav shanitin la'azharas misas bezdinu. That is subject to a warning about being subject to the death penalty. And we have, at least the majority opinion is, v'chol lav shanitin la'azhara misas bezdin Ain lokin alav. We don't give lashes if one is warned in connection, if it's a violation for which one is subject to the death penalty. So mishum mahachi kamu kimna karebi Yishmael. No, you're forgetting an important thing. That's exactly why we set this all up like Rabbi Yishmael. Da'amar lav shenitin la'azharas misas beistin lokin alav. That's why we say it like Rabbi Yishmael, because he does say that if you have something that is subject to the death penalty, but the warning that's given is actually associated with lashes, well, then you can give this person lashes, even though technically he should be subject to the death penalty. Since he was given the wrong warning, we can give him lashes. Whereas the majority viewpoint, the other viewpoint, the viewpoint of Rabbi Akiva, is that you do not get lashes in that situation. So that's why we say that our Mishnah is like, we said that our Mishnah is like Rabbi Yishmael. So ha lav hachi kaima ka Rabbi Akiva. Well, 1 second, kashya dios. And if we're not for this, would we be able to say that our Mishnah is really like Rabbi Akiva? What about Yedios? What about the case of whether or not it's aware? Meaning the whole reason that we don't want to say that it was like Rabbi Akiva is because of the question of when one is tamei. Rabbi Akiva says that you're only going to be subject to the carbon ola v'yored if you forget that you yourself are tamei. But if you forget what the location is, and you therefore participate, you go into an area that is actually part of the Beis Hamikdash, and therefore you, while you are tamei, so then you would not be subject to the Korban Ola V'Yored, according to Rabbi Akiva. But our Mishnah seems to suggest that, in fact, the process of being subject to tamei and having kodesh at the same time applies whether it's you yourself who are tamei and you forget about it, or you yourself, you know that you're tamei, but you forget about where you are. And that's not true according to Rabbi Akiva. But lav amrat Rabbi Yishmael hilu malkus. But 1 second, we can answer that in fact we could say that it's Rabbi Akiva and say that we're talking about lashes. So Rabbi Akiva nami ula malkos. But so the whole reason in the end that we don't say that our Mishnah is like Rabbi Akiva, and we don't say that the whole situation is about lashes, and we say that instead it's Rabbi Yishmael, is because Rabbi Yishmael is the one who says l'lav shenitin la'azharas misas beistin lokin alav. He's the one that can say with respect to the carrying on Shabbos that that's going to be just subject to lashes if that's the warning that's given, where Rabbi Akiva would disagree with that. So Rabbi Akiva has 2 reasons that our Mishnah can't go like him. So as a result, so again, we now think we've got it resolved, but no, we don't, because Ihachi, the Gemara picks up, Yedios hasraos mi baile. 1 second, what does our Mishnah say? Our Mishnah should say, it talks about the awareness with respect to Tuma, but it should say, I'm sorry, the way to phrase it is Yedios, our Mishnah says that it's about awareness. Hasraos mi baile. It should have been about the warning, meaning the whole reason that we're attributing our Mishnah to Rabbi Yishmael is because he allows such a warning. So why are you focusing on the awareness? That isn't what's the problem is. And hello, Kasha, Tana Yedios Dehasros. So no, when we say it's Yedios, we mean Yedios of Hasros, that we're talking about the knowledge of the warning. But second, but Ihachi Shtayim Shehein Arba. But then if we think about it, we've undermined our entire Mishnah, because our entire Mishnah said that these are all cases of two things that are really four things. So for example, when it comes to Tuma, there are the four things are you could forget about the fact that you're Tameh, and you can have and you can eat Kodesh. You can forget about the fact that you're Tameh and you can go into the Beit HaMikdash, or you can you can know that you're Tameh and you can forget about the fact that the object is Kodesh. And you can know that you're Tameh, and you can forget about the location that it's Kodesh. But if in fact we're talking about an intentional violation, it's Tartihu Dahavyan. It is only two things, because there is no I'm forgetting about the fact that I'm Tameh. I know that I'm Tameh. So the only two things is I know that I'm Tameh and I'm eating Kodesh, and I know that I'm Tameh and I'm going into the Beis HaMikdash. So why is our Mishnah focusing on two that are four? It's two that are two. V'su, and moreover, es sheyesh ba yedios betchila v'yediya v'sof v'helem beintayim. Our Mishnah talks about how you knew that you were Tameh originally, then you forgot that you were Tameh, and then you knew that you were Tameh at the end. But v'ha'alama l'malkos mayavite. Who cares about whether or not you forgot that you were Tameh? We're dealing with a situation that you're subject to lashes. That's an intentional violation. You needed to know that you were Tameh. So who cares if there was a moment that you forgot that you were Tameh? That's totally irrelevant. Visu hare zev olav yorid. And moreover, our Mishnah throughout seems to be talking about the korban of olav yorid. So all of it is problematic according to our answer. So as a result, we reject everything that we've said. Ella Amar Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, Rebbe. Actually, our Mishnah is Rebbe. And now we can explain how it is that he says like Rabbi Yishmael in one thing and Rabbi Akiva in something else. That's because he agrees with Rabbi Yishmael in one thing and Rabbi Akiva in something else. V'nasib la'aliba de Tanai. And
why do we say it's impossible, according to Rabbi Shmuel, why that it's impossible to say that one forgets that he's Tameh? Why is that an impossibility?
Because we are saying that the case that he's talking about is an intentional case. You are subject to lashes. And if we're subject to lashes, you can't have forgotten. If you've forgotten, you're a shogeg. If you and so you wouldn't get lashes. But we've just attributed and said that our Mishnah is like Rabbi Yishmael. All of it is like Rabbi Yishmael, and it's all dealing with lashes. But lashes doesn't have two that are four. It has two that are two, because the only situations that you're subject to lashes are you're Tameh and you eat Kodesh, or you're Tameh and you go into the Beis HaMikdash. Okay, so as a result, the whole thing doesn't fit well with our Mishnah. And so Rav Yosef says that it's Rebbe, v'nasiv la aliba de Tanai, b'yedios nasiv la k'Rebbe Yishmael. When it comes to the knowledge of Tuma, he agrees with Rabbi Yishmael, who says that two cases are four cases. And so as a result, you're subject to the korban olav yored. And b'shavuos, and when it comes to oaths, Nasiv Lak Rabbi Akiva. He agrees with Rabbi Akiva, who says that you're subject to a korban olav yored, not just on an oath about the future, but also an oath about the past. If you forgot that you had eaten the cookie and you make that oath. So Amar of Ashi, Amri Te Lishmaita Kamei de Rav Kahana. I was teaching this teaching of Rav Yosef that our Mishnah is like Rebbe in front of Rav Kahana of Amarli, and he taught me, Lo Tema Rabbi Nosiv La Aliba de Tanai, Vele Lo Svirle. And by the way, don't think that Rebbe just was teaching it in both directions, but he didn't himself actually agree to those views. Ella Rebbe Tamai Denafshe Mefarish. He actually agrees both with Rabbi Yishmael when it comes to Tuma and with Rabbi Akiva when it comes to oaths. And how do I know that? Because we're going to break it all down. Titania, because we have this brisa that is going to make clear Rebbe's view and how it's different from Rabbi Akiva and is consistent with Rabbi Yishmael. Minayin she'ein, because now the Tanakama in this Mishnah, this brisa that we're about to cite, is Rabbi Akiva. So this first opinion is not consistent with our Mishnah. Minayin she'ein chayav ella. How do I know that you're only going to be subject to a korban olav yored if you knew that you were tamei, then you forgot you were tamei, and in the end you knew that you were tamei? Talmud Lomar v'ne'elam shnei pamim divrei Rabbi Akiva. You had to have the psukim say, this is all from Vayikra Perek Hey Pasuk Psukim Bet V'Gimel, that it says right there it says V'ne'elam twice. So the point is that it became concealed twice. Once it was concealed, or became unconcealed twice. Became concealed twice, because once we're talking about a case of in connection with the Beit HaMikdash, and once it's talking about a case where where it's talking about eating kodesh. So those are two separate prohibitions. So that's why it needs two v'ne'elams, and so each one teaches us one of the situations in which Rabbi Akiva would say it's going to be problematic. Rabbi Omer eino tzarech. You don't need two v'ne'elams to teach us about the Beis HaMikdash and the eating kodesh. While being tamei. Harehu Omer, because he says, what does the pasuk say as we turn to Dalon Amabes? V'ne'elam miklal diyada. The implication is that you already knew. And so as a result, v'hu yada, and then it says that he knew. Hare kan shtei yedios. So we know already that there are two knowledges. So as a result, im kain, ma Talmud lomar v'ne'elam. Why does it say it twice? L'chayev al ha'elam tuma v'al ha'elam mikdash. The point is that Rebbe says, just like our Mishnah, that it doesn't make a difference whether the thing that you forgot is the fact that you're tamei, or you don't remember that the item that you're eating is kodesh, or that the place that you're going to is the Beit HaMikdash. And so this disagrees with Rabbi Akiva, and this is exactly, though, what our Mishnah says. And we see that Rebbe specifically agrees with Rabbi Yishmael's viewpoint. That's exactly what Rabbi Yishmael's viewpoint is. So we have now proof that Rebbe agrees with Rabbi Yishmael. Ashkechan biyadios de isle tamei denafshe. Now, when it comes to Tuma, we see that he is specifically viewed like Rabbi Yishmael. Shevuot delesle taima denafshe minalan. How do I know that he has this similar view that according to that he agrees with Rabbi Akiva in connection with Shevuos? Because we don't have that explicitly anywhere that he agrees with that. Svarahu. That is going to be based on logic. Rabbi Akiva, my taima, we're going to skip the parentheses. Rabbi Akiva, my taima, kach mechayev l'sha'avar. Why is it that Rabbi Akiva believes that one is subject to a korban olav yored if you make an oath about the past and say, I didn't eat the cookie when you did? Didarish ribuye umiyute. It is based on the concept of ribuy and miyut. Rebbe Nami Darish Ribuy Umiyute. And the answer is how do we know that Rebbe agrees with Rebbe Akiva? Because they both use the approach of Ribuy and Miyut. Titania, Rebbe Omer. Now, this is not in connection with oaths, but it is in connection with a situation where Rebbe explicitly says that he is using the concepts of Ribuy and Miyut. B'kol, and as opposed to the concepts of klal uprat. B'kol podin, b'chor adam, when it comes to a redeeming a person, a firstborn son, so you're allowed to redeem him with anything. Chutz mishtaros, chutz min hashtaros. The only exception is contracts. Meaning, what does that mean? Take a look at Rashi. It's about the 1, 2, 3. It's the wide lines towards the bottom of Rashi. It's 6, 9 lines down, end of the line. Chutz min hashtaros. Haya chayev lo adam b'shtar. Hey, slime. If somebody owes you 5 slime, which is the amount that you have to pay to the Kohen to redeem a firstborn son, v'nosan zeh ozo shtar l'Kohen. And so what do? You have an IOU from John Doe, and so you give it to David Cohen as the redemption payment. And so as a result, David Cohen can now collect the 5 slime from John Doe. And so it's as if you gave David Cohen your 5 slime. So the answer is that does not work. We do not allow it. In that situation, the son is not redeemed because that contract, although we give it meaning in terms of it being valuable, it does not have value in and of itself. Aval b'shar kol dvarim, but any kind of other thing, then podin. Then we are going to say that it is redeemed. And now we're going to, Rashi then continues with what the rabbis say in this brisa. So we'll just go back into the Gemara, V'Rabbanan Amrei, and the rabbis say, no, you don't. It's not just a shtar that you can't redeem with. B'kol podim b'chor adam chutz mi avadim ushtaris v'karkos. No, you're right that you can't use a contract, but you also can't use slaves and land. My time of the Rebbe. Now, what's the reasoning of Rebbe? And here's our proof. Darish ribui umiyute. He is deriving the law from using ribui and miyut. Because upduyav mi ben chodesh riba. The fact that you can redeem from 1 month old, that is a general statement that has no limitations, which implies that you can use absolutely anything to redeem somebody. But then it says it's got to have the valuation of 5 shekels of silver. Well, 5 shekels of silver, that is a limitation. So tifteh, but then it goes back and says the word tifteh that you should redeem, chazav v'riba. So it comes back and expands again. So riba umiyad v'riba, riba hakol. When you have a riba umiyad v'riba, it basically includes everything, but you still have to exclude something. So my riba kol mili. So what is included? Everything. Umay miyet shtarot. So the one thing that will exclude is contracts. And the reason is because, again, contracts don't have the paper that it's written on is not what is worth the value. It is the value that we give it based on your ability to collect. It doesn't have intrinsic value. And so as a result, that's the one thing that we will exclude according to Rebbe. The Rabbanan,
Well, there's another issue, which is that contracts like promissory notes, you can't like sell them in halakha the same way you can in secular society today.
So it's actually interesting. This Gemara is one of the bases of the machlokus about that issue. When we finish, we'll turn to the Tosos, but if you want to take a look at it, it's the Tosfos second to last of the medium wide lines in Tosfos. You'll see that there's a Tosfos that touches on that exact issue.
Excellent. Thank you.
V'Rabbanan darshe klali upratik. So now, how come the rabbis disagree and expand the exclusion to also include land and slaves? Because they don't use the principle of riboy and miut, they use the principle of klal uprat. And when it comes to a klal uprat, uptuyav mi ben chodesh klal. Again, we have the very same concept. First, we have a generalization. Prat. So we have this same generalization followed by a specification, followed by a generalization. But instead of saying riboy miut to riboy, where we say everything is included and we narrow the exclusion as much as possible, when it comes to klal prat klal, that principle says, as we say every morning, and when we say the Shloshas Midos, so we say Shloshas Midos, Shetorah Nidresses Behen, we say Klalu Prat Uklal Iatadan Elakaina Prat. That when we say that we have a Klalu Prat Uklal, we apply to the exception all similar situations. So ma prat hamiforish davar hamitalto v'gufo mamon. So what is the category in the middle? The category middle is money. What is money? It's movable. Now, of course, we're talking about metal that has value in and of itself. We're talking about it's something that's movable and it has intrinsic value. Af kol davar hamitalto v'gufo mamon. So everything that is considered movable and has intrinsic value would be included. So yatsu karkos she'ena metaltalin. So that excludes land which is not movable, and yatsu avadim shehuksha karkos. And similarly, it's going to exclude slaves which are comparable to land, and yatsu shtaros afal pisha metaltin in gufan mamon. Because when it comes to the contract, even though it is movable, it has no intrinsic value. So as a result, we now know that Rebbe agrees with the concept of ribuy miut because he disagrees with the Chachamim who said klalu pratu klal, and he says ribuy miut. Ribuy miut is how Rebbe Akiva determined that when it comes to an oath, even an oath about the past that's false will be subject to a korban ola v'yored. So it must be that our Mishnah is Rebbe Yehuda Nasi, that Rebbe agrees with Rebbe Yishmael when it comes to Tuma, and Rebbe Akiva when it comes to oaths. So now let's take a quick look at that Tosos, and with that we'll be done for today, and I'll pose the question with which we will start tomorrow. Yatsu shtaros. So when it comes to contracts, we're now in Tosos, second to last wide line, medium wide line. Hadamash mahacha. So what's the implication here? Deshayach b'shtaros machar. The whole hava amina of the fact that we need the Torah to tell us that you can't use a contract to pay somebody for a pidyon haben shows that absent that, meaning in an ordinary case, you would be able to transfer a contract and transfer the liability to shayak b'shtaros mecher. So we see that a contract can be sold according to the Torah. It's because it's specifically needed to exclude it in other places. So we specifically need the Torah to tell us you can't use a contract. That's because the Torah says that you can. Now, again, as Charlie highlighted, this is not a universal position. The Rambam disagrees. The Rambam says that the sale of contracts is only rabbinic. And the reason that the Rambam says that is because of the problem of the ability of the original contract holder to cancel the loan. That we have this remarkable thing. It's so interesting because usually the rabbis have facilitated the sales of contracts and have been really good about all these things. This is one of those cases that it really undermines the ability to engage in sale of contracts, because the rabbis say that if Moshe owes me money and I have an IOU from him and I sell that IOU to Ken, and then I cancel the debt and I say, you know what, Moshe, you're such a great guy, because he is a great guy, and I say he doesn't have to pay me back, the document that Ken has bought from me has effectively become worthless because Ken doesn't have the ability to collect. So, and so to explain how that can be, the Rambam says that the answer to that is because it's all rabbinic, that the rabbis do it. But for Tosos, it's not about that. It's something fundamental in the contract. Now, there's an aspect of understanding that on some level there is both a personal liability that Moshe has and a documentary liability that Moshe has. And they effectively, even though I've separated the two by selling the document to Ken, the personal liability is still to me. And so as a result, I still have the ability to waive it and to say that he doesn't have to pay. So that is the interesting debate
Now,
that is
Rabbi,
is really on.
In the case of the contract that essentially gets voided, Ken could still sue me for voiding the contract and making it worthless, couldn't he?
Can you me? I'm the one who was
Oh, you
owed the
said,
money.
sorry.
So yeah, but yes, he could. Yeah, one would think so. It's not. I don't know 100% that he could, but one would certainly think that he would have some kind of right against me. One would, whether the question is whether it needs to be actually explicit, that I essentially give him a guarantee or something like that. But that's it does highlight that in those situations you should get a guarantee in order to make sure that you contract around the issue. But I don't know. You ask a great question, and I'm not 100% sure whether Ken would have a right of action against me for having essentially made his thing valueless. Because remember, this is one of those cases. I think this is a case of Garmi where it's not. I think this is. I can't remember whether this is Grum or Garmi. And so my apologies to everybody. But if I were to just let's say Ken lent the money to Moshe, but I go over to Ken's house and I burn the document, it's not clear that I'm liable for that. Because the underlying, even though now Moshe has the ability to say lo hayu dvarim ma'olam, that there was never any kind of agreement, and there's nothing that Ken can do about it, I haven't really taken any money from Ken. So there's a question about whether or not my waiver would be viewed similarly, or whether my waiver is viewed as much as worse because there's no ability to collect at all. So, but it's a very interesting question, and my apologies for not remembering the answer. But definitely worthy of further discussion. And the disadvantage of Daf Yomi, the advantage of Daf Yomi is that we do a little bit every day, and it's remarkable how much we can get done. Disadvantage of Daf Yomi is that we don't have the time and ability to sort of go into this into greater detail. But I wish.
Haven't we discussed sale of contracts through Ketubot? I mean,
yes,
we have a long discussion there in many places where one sells the ketubah to another one in advance.
Yes, 100%.
So contracts can be sold then, right?
100%. In the end, we definitely poskin that they can be sold. The issue is that a rabbinic sale or a biblical sale? The Tosos would say it's only that it's biblical, that Torah allows that sale, and the Rambam would say that it's a rabbinic situation. So that's just to be clear. But you're absolutely right that we 100% say that you can sell it. And I'll note that right now, where we're going to go next, so just to set it up for tomorrow, is does Rebbe really always hold Ribuy Miyut? Because we're going to see that maybe he does not, at least in some situations, that he's going to say that we actually use Klal Uprat. And so how do we understand that? Maybe it's not everywhere that he uses Ribuy Miyut, and therefore maybe we don't necessarily know that Rebbe agrees with Rebbe Akiva. But that will be for tomorrow, so stay tuned.
Weren't we trying to say that the miyut was the star, that we weren't, that right? Wasn't that the ribui?
The miyut was the fact that when it was ribui miyut to ribui, that the only thing you can't use according to Rebbe is a shtar to pay the kohen as part of redeeming a firstborn.
So wasn't that dealing with the sale of the star as well?
Well, that's the implication that Tosfos takes away from it. The fact that we need the Torah to exclude the ability to pay a kohen with a shtar shows that ordinarily, if I just owed you money, if I just owed the kohen money, and it had nothing to do with the pidyon aben, I could give a contract as a method of paying back. As a thing of value. And so as a result, that according to Tosfos is the strong proof that Tosfos has that the sale of a contract is biblical. You're absolutely right. And Tosfos has to the Rambam has to struggle with how he understands this Gemara because it does seem to be confusing from that perspective.
So Tosfos wants to say it would be permissible?
Not that it would be permissible to give to a kohen, but it would be permissible from a biblical perspective to generally sell a contract, an IOU contract.
So then how are we making that part of the exclusion?
That's why the Torah needs to tell us that you can't use it. It's specifically in connection with redeeming a firstborn that you can't use a contract. In every other situation, the implication is you can use a contract as a payment.
So that so that just the case of the poda.
Exactly. That's where we derive this ribui miyut to ribui. And so as a result, Rebbe derives from that the ribui miyut to ribui is specifically about contracts. And so as a result, that's why you can't use a contract in connection with redemption, but the implication being that you can use contracts in connection with other situations of payment of money.
Oh, okay. So it can be used. It's just in that situation. That's the
exactly. It's just in that situation. That's exactly right.
And Tosfos says that,
and Tosfos therefore says that that's exactly right. The implication is that in every other situation you can sell a contract biblically.
Right.
And Rambam says no, even though you might have thought that this is really not a true drasha. It's just a smachta or something along those lines. I believe is how he would need to answer it.
So he would not hold. He would not fully hold. He would not hold.
No, he agrees with the principles, right? The principle that you can't use a contract for redemption 100%. Indeed, we paskin like the Rabbanan who say that you can't use a contract or an eved or a land. But he would say, and the Rambam would say that the exclusion of a contract is not necessary from a biblical perspective because contracts weren't sellable biblically. It's just telling us why, even after the rabbis have established the fact that we allow the sale of a contract, you still can't use a contract to redeem a firstborn son.
But he would still hold that you could use it in other cases, right?
Yes. Everybody agrees. Everybody agrees that in other cases you can sell a contract. The question is that sale biblical or rabbinic? According to Tosfos, it's biblical. According to the Rambam, it's rabbinic.
And there's the risk that the contract might get voided by
exactly. And according to everybody, there's still a risk. And according to the Rambam, he explains it because it's rabbinic, and Tosfos has to struggle with how could it be that you can cancel the contract if it's a biblical sale. That's exactly those are the pull and push of the argument between Rambam and Tosfos over whether or not the sale of a contract is rabbinic or biblical. All right. Have a wonderful day. Looking forward to continuing our learning. I'll be back with you on Wednesday and looking forward to our continuing learning then. Be well.
Yasha Kalach.
Rotia.